Right. Welcome, everybody. We have new rules for the new season of RLCS 2024. And since no one likes to read, there are way too many pages in the rule set. I'm here to give you all the important rules, the top 5 of them, why they could be good, they could be bad, and why some are really raising an eyebrow. I'm gonna be that cringe YouTuber that's like, don't miss the 5th rule because it's the juiciest. I actually did leave the juiciest for last. So the way I'm breaking this up is we're going to start with what we knew from the announcement and then how that's been clarified by the rule book. So it should be really helpful for you guys to follow along. Let's start with number 1. What we knew, that the top 128 ranks get paid. Yes, that information is here. It is known. Everyone knows it now. But actually, get this, it's not $3, it's not $6, it's $300 that 65th through 128th are getting if they place that in North America and EU. If you're a bubble player, this isn't the best news, but it's better news than what it was when normally the top 16 only got paid. If you're a top pro player, it's not that great, okay? Some winnings are getting a 20% cut. For the top, you're getting nearly a 30% cut in your winnings just so that these other players can get a chunk of the change. Not so great, especially from an org standpoint, if you're trying to justify your return on an investment on signing a team for Rocket League Esports. It's a nice idea, but it's just bad execution. So if I would have seen that investment in the bubble with 32 and below, or maybe to get more teams at the majors or the worlds, would have been great. But until I see that, this at this point is just bad for overall optics for the esport, and especially for the top pro players, just not getting nearly as much money as they used to. Let's get into rule number 2. So what we knew already from this announcement of the season was that RLCS begins on January 26th. This is next Friday. What we actually know now is that the 26th only has North America and the Middle East. The schedule has been released. Middle East and North Africa and North America will begin their open qualifier on the 26th. And guess what? Every region is playing on the same weekend now, except for EU. That's right. EU has been moved. Their open qualifier begins an entire week later than every other region. So what does this mean? What's my take on this new setup of when regions are playing? I'm going to hold until I see more information. At first, this just makes NA sound like a minor region. The only Championship Sunday region that's being played on alternate weeks is EU. It feels like there's going to be one premier weekend and then another weekend where there's just coverage of every region. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what the broadcast is going to look like or how they're necessarily going to brand it. But the broadcast schedule isn't supposed to come out for another week, so I don't really know whether to say this is a good or a bad thing. So let's move on to rule number 3. So what we already knew was that North America and Europe have 4 spots to go to the major. This is one less than the last season, so kind of sucks, but that's what it is. What we know now is that EU is seeded way better than North America. Check out the seedings here, the rank order, starting with the 2 European teams in the top 2 seeds. And what I find especially interesting is when you compare EU3 to NA3. EU3 is in the top 4 seeds. NA3 is apparently worse than all EU teams and the first Middle East team. And you want to know what my take is as an NA fanboy? You want to know what my take to this is? Damn right! Damn right! EU is on top. There's no question about it. Take it from someone who went to Boston and went to the spring major, tried rooting for an NA player, and Chronic is the one top 8 player from North America. There was one player. That was it. The top 4 felt like an EU regional anyway. You don't believe me? Look at the bracket. Let's check out the championship final. Oh, 2 EU teams. Let's check out the top 4. Oh, 3 EU teams and a Middle East team. Oh, well, surely the top 6 had someone from North America. Yeah, Gen G, who had 2 European players on their team. Surely the top 8 had some North American players. No, a complexity team from NA of a Spaniard and 2 South American players. North America is in the rut. They got seeding that they deserved. Straight up, full stop. No questions asked. Let's move on. Rule number 4. That is interesting. Let's start with what we know, and that is that every team has to compete in every qualifier, and they will be seeded. What has been clarified? Exactly how they will be seeded. It's based on 3 parameters. Parameter number 1 is your RLCS points in the last season. Parameter number 2 is what your performance, what your rank was in the spring split of the last season. And parameter number 3 is your 3v3 rank, MMR. There was a rumor out there that 3v3 MMR was going to be used to seed all the teams in these qualifiers. And suddenly people like Monkey Moon, who has played, I think Fear reported on this, about like 8 3v3 ranked games in the last 3 seasons and is ranked champ 3, might not get a good seeding in the qualifiers, but rest assured that has been washed away. For those players who competed on teams that made it to the top 16, you have RLCS points and those carry over to your seeding. If you didn't make top 16, but you did compete in the spring split, no worries. They recorded your performance and your results on those spring split regionals, and you will be seeded based on that. And then finally, if you haven't done either of those 2, well, you have till January 22nd, midnight Pacific time, to get that 3v3 MMR up, and up. Keep it going, and you'll get seeding, apparently, based on that. Last thing to consider here is this means that off-season is not considered in the seeding process, and I think that's completely fine. Not all pros even participate in off-season tournaments, and they're not really required in RLCS, so I don't know why it would be in consideration. Some people found that surprising. I really didn't. So overall, my take is this is a big W. Good take. You absolutely want to seed players based on their performance in the previous season. To not consider that and only consider 3v3 MMR would be grounds to boycott the league. No questions asked. That would be so asinine and so ignorant that it would honestly just be laughable. And now for rule number 5, the juiciest of them all, something that I've spoke so much about, and I'm excited to begin a discussion with all of you. Let's start again with what we know. The information we know is that the same regions apply once again to this season of 2024 to the last season. We have EU, NA, MENA, SAM, OC, APAC, and SSA. What we know now, anyone can compete in any region. That's right. 13-year-old cracked Timmy living in Los Angeles, California, can grab a team and compete in Oceania if he really wants to and fend for a top team that is placed. Fun fact, this is just about how FNCS works, which is also under Epic Games, but it's not how RLCS has operated. In my last video, I called for clear restrictions on who can compete in which region, proposing a 1/3 rule, that at least one player on a team has to be from and or living in that region. The restrictions are much clearer now. And there's a particular reason why they're much clearer. It's because there are none. It's because there are no restrictions. How clear could it possibly be now? If you can queue on that server, have a blast. If you do better than all the rest of the teams and qualify and then win and then represent that region at the major, congratulations. That's completely fair. I've talked a lot about how I think representation between each region is something that is very, very important. And you might expect me to sit here and say that my take is this is bad. This is the worst thing ever, yada, yada, yada. But you know what word I'm going to use for this particular decision to remove all guardrails from who can compete in what region? I'm going to use one word. Lazy. I think it's lazy. It takes time and effort to determine a fair and a reasonable way to hold a global competition where each region competes to see who is the best. Inter-region transfers are completely fine and appropriate, but with the right justification and with the right guardrails. When you remove these guardrails between regions, it endangers the removal of the identity and the opportunity for the participants in that region, in my opinion. So I think it's just lazy to not have any sort of restrictions or guardrails whatsoever. And if you're an American right now sitting there thinking, so what? You know, if a player can compete in another region on those servers and win, then what's the big deal? What's the big deal? If they're better, what's the big deal? A year or two from now, when there's no Americans to root for at the international major, don't come crying at that point. That's all I'm going to say. I think it's a slippery slope what they're doing right now, removing all guardrails to have any team or player play in any region they like. And I'm not too excited for what that looks like in the future. I hope it gets addressed. So that's it, everybody. That's it. There's some other fun details and rules, such as you have to be at least platinum to compete. Sorry, gold, silver, and bronzes, maybe next season. Split number 2 earns more points than split number 1, so that makes the transfer window between splits especially more interesting. Speaking of the transfer window, there's really interesting details within that, like whatever region you compete in at first, you have to stay in that region, barring the chance you're an exempt edition during the transfer window. Open qualifiers are all best of 3 until you get to the top 48, making upsets and interesting results all the more likely. APAC gets a potential W, as games can be competed on whatever server all the teams agree on. And more rules, and more rules. Tell me in the comments, what did I miss? Tell me in the comments what rule sticks out to you in this new season. And finally, if you were an RLCS official, what rule would you make? What thing would you particularly change? I want to hear about it, so let me know, and stay tuned for more updates dealing with this new season of RLCS.